I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. In fact, I was the one holding the champagne glass, off to the side, near the window, when it happened. She didn't know I was in earshot, or maybe she did, but I heard her say it. She's sweet, but she's just too cringe. Like, I love her. But not for my aesthetic, you know? My daughter, my only child, the person I spent 28 hours in labor for, called me too cringe to be part of a housewarming party vibe. She said it with a laugh, one of those rehearsed chuckles you use when you want to seem above someone without sounding cruel. But it sliced clean. No one defended me. Not her husband. Not her trendy little friend group. Just a beat of silence. Then music. Laughter. Clinking glasses. I could have walked out right then, but I didn't. I stayed. Smiled when people passed by. Took photos of her new plants like a proud mother should. And when the party ended, I gave her a long hug and told her the peach cobbler was delicious. Then I drove home, straight to the drawer, the one that held every paper she forgot she signed. Because if I'm too cringe to be part of her world, then maybe I'm also too cringe to be the one holding her house together. And tomorrow morning, her aesthetic is going up for sale. Her name is Emily. She used to wait by the window for me to get home from work, run barefoot across the kitchen tiles, wrap her tiny arms around my waist and say, "Mommy smells like crayons and apples." She used to laugh with her whole chest, dance in her pajamas, cry into my collar after middle school drama. I was a single mom, 32 years of teaching 6th grade English, bologna sandwiches for lunch, coupons for everything, and dreams that always came second. But I loved her with a kind of fierceness I never knew I had. Every sock missing a pair, every 2 a.m. fever, every canceled vacation to pay for college prep. When her father died in a car accident, I sold my wedding ring to pay the mortgage and whispered to her while she slept, "You'll never have to worry. I'll always show up." And I did, even when she met Andrew. Andrew was the kind of man who used words like brand to describe people. He worked in creative capital or digital ecosystems. Honestly, I stopped keeping track. The first time we met, he told me my outfit was authentically maternal, like I was a museum exhibit. But Emily loved him, and that was enough for me. When they got married and wanted a home, but didn't qualify for a mortgage just yet, I offered to buy one in my name, just until they got settled. I dipped into my retirement, liquidated an old CD account, signed the papers, paid the taxes, and handed them the keys. They called it our forever nest online. Not her mom's deed, not the house her mother worked 30 years to afford. No, just dreams come true. I never corrected them, not when they remodeled the kitchen, not when they painted over the mural Emily and I once made in the garage, not when they replaced the garden I planted with artificial turf because it matched the aesthetic. I just kept paying the insurance premiums, kept forwarding the utility bills when they arrived in my mailbox. Kept quiet when I overheard Andrew say, "She's not very design-forward, but she means well." And Emily? She started calling me Ma. Stopped texting back. Stopped inviting me to dinner. And when I came over to drop off a pie, she said, "Text first next time." We're trying to keep the vibe consistent. Still, I smiled, because that's what mothers do. We stay soft. We stay quiet, even when it hurts. Until one day, that softness gets mistaken for irrelevance. That week, I found an old letter. Emily had written it when she was 15. It was tucked inside a worn copy of A Wrinkle in Time, one of the few books we used to read together. In pink ink, she'd scrawled, "Dear future me, don't ever forget Mom. Even if I get cool or busy or married, she always made me feel safe." I read it twice, then a third time, my hands shaking just a little. I didn't cry. I just thought, what changed? Was it the way I still used coupons? My outdated phone? The coat I've worn since 2018? Had I gone from comfort to cringe? No, I hadn't changed. She had, or maybe the world around her did. And yet I remained her foundation, the quiet scaffolding holding it all together, until she made it clear she didn't even see me anymore. She erased me from her story like I was never the first chapter. But what she didn't realize was that she'd never turned the page on the deed. It was a Saturday afternoon, cloudy, still. Emily was hosting a housewarming party for her new friends from the marketing firm. I'd been invited technically, but the invite felt more like an afterthought, a forwarded evite with no note. No. Can't wait to see you, Mom. Still, I baked a peach cobbler, her favorite. I wore my nicest blouse, ironed slacks, did my hair the way she used to, like pulled back, neat. When I rang the bell, I waited a long time before anyone answered. A stranger opened the door, blinked at me. Oh, you must be her mom? Her mom, not Mrs. Simmons, not Emily's mother. Just a filler, a prop. Inside, the house looked like a showroom. Muted grays, abstract art, succulents lined up like soldiers. No photos of us, not one family picture, not even the one from her college graduation. The one where I held her hand while she cried in the parking lot after failing her last math final. Gone. I stood awkwardly in the kitchen, holding the cobbler, looking for somewhere to put it. Andrew walked by and nodded. Nice to see you, he said, like I was the UPS guy. Emily barely looked at me. She air-kissed my cheek, waved toward a folding chair in the corner, and whispered, "Keep your phone on silent, okay? The vibe's really curated." I felt like a stranger in a house I paid for. I watched her laugh too loud with her coworkers, watched them compliment the decor, the furniture, the intentional energy of the space, watched my daughter bask in their approval like it was sunlight. Then it happened. I wasn't even close to them, but her voice carried. "She's sweet," Emily said. "But, honestly, she's kinda cringe. Like, not in a bad way, just, she doesn't really match our aesthetic, you know. Laughter, not mean, not cruel, just dismissive. And the worst part, no one disagreed. No one said, 'Hey, that's your mom.' No one even looked my way. They just kept sipping spritzers and nibbling vegan cheese cubes. And I stood there, cobbler still in my hands, like a guest at someone else's mistake. It was quiet inside me, so quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't cry, doesn't break. It rearranges. I walked to the table, set the cobbler down, poured myself some lemonade, and smiled. Because in that moment, something crystallized. I wasn't invisible. I was unnecessary. A relic. A dusty relic they kept on a shelf until it clashed with the decor. When the party was over, I helped clean up. No one asked me to. Old habits. Emily hugged me at the door, said, "Thanks for coming. Ma, hope it wasn't too overwhelming." Then she added, almost as a joke, "Don't worry, we'll invite you to the next one. Just maybe skip the floral print." I nodded, got in my car, drove home in silence. And then I opened the drawer, the one with the deed, the purchase contract, the bank transfer receipts, all in my name, all untouched. I sat down at the kitchen table, laid out the documents one by one, and whispered, "Let's curate a vibe of our own, shall we?" That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing it. She's kinda cringe. Not angry, not shouted, just tossed out like an old receipt. I sat on my porch in the dark, wrapped in the same cardigan I wore when I brought her home from the hospital. It still smelled faintly like lavender and old hope. I thought about the first time she drew me in crayon. Triangle dress, curly hair, stick arms holding a heart. She'd labeled it "My Mom is Magic." What happened to that little girl? Somewhere between graduation photos and Instagram reels, she traded love for polish, gratitude for aesthetic. But I wasn't mad. I was done being the ghost in someone else's house, done smiling through erasure. So I called my friend Lenora. She was a retired real estate broker, sharp, honest, and owed me a favor from a PTA bake sale debacle in 2007. We met at a diner the next morning. I slid the papers across the table. She raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" As a tax audit, she whistled low. "Dang, you're still on title. No joint tenancy, no transfer, no trust. None. They never asked. I never told." Lenora sipped her coffee. "Well then, sweetheart, looks like you're not just the mother of the bride. You're the landlord of the petit." I laughed. For the first time in weeks, it felt like air came all the way in. By noon, she'd contacted a listing agent. By evening, I had a call from a buyer's rep. The market was hot. And the house? Well, it was apparently charming with potential, just like me. I didn't do anything rash. Didn't throw them out or post a TikTok revenge saga. I gave notice. Legally, properly, in writing. A 60-day vacate letter, wrapped in calm. When Emily received it, she thought it was a prank. Then she called. 6 missed calls, 1 voicemail. Mom, what is this? Are you seriously selling our house? Call me back. I didn't call that night, or the next. I waited until I had peace in my chest. Then I texted, Hi, sweetie, I'm selling my house. You're welcome to make an offer. She didn't reply right away, but the next morning, I got another call. This time she was crying. Mom, you can't just take our house away. We've built a life here. Andrew's clients come over. My followers love this space. Her voice broke, and for a flicker of a moment, I felt that old pull, the instinct to fix it, to say, It's okay, sweetheart. I won't do anything drastic. But then I remembered the folding chair, the whisper about vibe, the laugh. So I breathed in slowly and said, This house was never taken from you. It was loaned, like love, and love, like property, needs to be honored. There was silence. Then a week. So what now? I kept my tone gentle. You have options. You can move, or you can buy it from me at market rate. But I won't keep pretending I don't exist. She said nothing, just hung up. That week, Andrew emailed. A cold PDF proposal with a lowball offer and a note that read, We hope you'll prioritize family over financials. I forwarded it to Lenora. She replied, 1 sentence. They really don't know who raised you. 2 weeks later, we accepted an all-cash offer from a couple relocating from Denver. Emily's things were still in the house. She hadn't packed, so I hired movers, boxed it all up with care, and paid for a storage unit downtown. The key? I left it in a little envelope, taped to the front door. Under it, a sticky note. Just 2 words. Curated closure. The house sold faster than anyone expected. Within 10 days of listing, we had 3 offers. 2 were over asking. 1 came with a handwritten letter from a retired couple looking to move closer to their grandkids. I picked them, not because of the price, though it helped, but because they reminded me of something I used to believe in. Stability. Roots. Sunday morning coffee that isn't for content. Lenora handled the closing. I stayed quiet, calm, composed. Emily, on the other hand, spiraled. She texted, then called, then emailed. Each message came with a different tactic. Guilt, flattery, panic, even a veiled threat. At one point, she wrote, If you go through with this, you'll ruin my brand. My brand? Not our memories. Not my sense of home. Just her brand. That was the moment I stopped feeling conflicted. So I did something she never saw coming. I invited her to brunch. Just the 2 of us. Neutral territory. She showed up late. Wore sunglasses indoors. Didn't hug me. She ordered an oat milk latte and avocado toast. Didn't ask how I was. I let her talk about how I was overreacting. How people online were asking questions. How Andrew was furious and planning a statement. I sipped my tea. Waited. Then, gently, I pulled out a folder. Inside, the original house deed. My bank receipts. The renovation permits I'd signed. Insurance docs in my name. A printout of her Instagram story where she called it Our Forever Home. She blinked. Why are you showing me this? Because, I said, you've spent so long curating an image. You forgot who built the frame. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I leaned forward, calm. You didn't ruin anything. Emily, you just revealed it. You stopped treating me like a mother and started treating me like a character in your narrative. But the problem is, this isn't fiction. It's property law. Her hands tightened around the coffee cup. You didn't have to blindside me. I shook my head slowly. I didn't. I gave notice. Legal notice. You just didn't read the fine print, like you didn't read the deed. For the first time in years, she looked like a little girl again. Not the influencer, not the curated persona, just a daughter who realized the ground beneath her had always been borrowed. She whispered, I just wanted to make a life I was proud of. I reached for her hand, and I wanted you to make one that included me. There was a long pause. Then she said, So it's really done? I nodded. It's not revenge. Emily, it's a boundary. For the first time, I'm choosing to be seen. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just nodded. When the check came, I paid. Old habits. She left before I did. Didn't hug me. But she looked back before walking out the door. Small victories. That night, I began packing up some of my own things. Old documents, photo albums, the quilt my mother made me. The house wasn't just a house. It was a history book, written in peeling wallpaper and sun-bleached curtains. But letting it go didn't feel like loss. It felt like finally closing a chapter where I was written in the margins. 2 days before closing, Emily showed up at my door. No makeup, hoodie, hair pulled back. She held a box. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years. Mother's Day cards. A pair of ballet shoes she wore in 3rd grade. A framed photo of us in front of the old garden swing. I found these while clearing out the closets, she said. Her voice was small. I thought maybe you'd want them back. I smiled. I never gave them away. We didn't hug, but we stood quietly for a moment, and that silence didn't hurt. After she left, I placed the photo by the window, the one she painted shut when they renovated. And for once, it didn't bother me, because soon I'd have new windows, ones that opened, and new sunlight that didn't filter through curated filters. I was no longer too cringe. I was simply free. The next morning, I met with Lenora to finalize the closing. She brought croissants. I brought the last check for property taxes. Together, we tied the final ribbons on a life I'd maintained quietly for years. You okay? She asked. I paused, then nodded. For the first time in a long while. I'm not just okay. I'm realigned. We toasted with paper coffee cups. Not champagne, but it felt just as celebratory. Later that day, I stood in the empty living room. The echo of footsteps. The pale outline where the couch used to be. I ran my fingers along the window frame Emily used to sit in as a child. She'd press her forehead to the glass and say, "One day, I'll have a view that changes." She was right, just not in the way she thought. As the buyers arrived, I handed over the keys with steady hands. They were kind, gracious, grateful. The woman touched my arm and said, "We'll take good care of it. We promise." I smiled, and for the first time, that didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a passing of story. That night, I slept with the windows open. No curated playlist, no filtered scent diffuser, just air. Real unbranded air, and a truth that settled gently in my chest. Sometimes reclaiming your space starts with leaving it. I didn't announce it online, didn't make a statement or post a story, because this wasn't for the internet. It was for me, for the woman who gave quietly, who stood quietly, and finally acted quietly. And if that's what cringe looks like, then I hope one day my daughter grows into it, fully. I didn't stay in town after the sale. I booked a long-term rental in a coastal village 3 hours south. Not far, but far enough. The place had creaky floors, lemon trees outside the kitchen window, and a porch that faced the sunrise. My only neighbor was an 82-year-old widow named Marlene, who baked peach muffins even when no one asked her to. She reminded me of who I was before I let the world rename me. I unpacked slowly, box by box, item by item. There were no aesthetic shelves, no content corners, just wood, sunlight, and silence that didn't ache. Each morning, I woke up without an alarm, walked to the shore with coffee in hand, waved to fishermen who didn't care about followers or vibe consistency. At first, I thought this would be the recovery phase, but it wasn't. It was the start of my counterplan, because here's what I realized. They don't just erase you with one insult. They do it over time, with every unreturned call, every eye roll, every seat they don't save for you. And the only way to survive that is not to beg to be seen, but to quietly build your own mirror. So I began writing. A memoir, maybe. A survival guide, sort of. Each chapter held a lesson. Each story a little scar turned into ink. I didn't intend to publish it. Not at first. But one afternoon, Marlene knocked on my door with a jar of preserved lemons and saw the stack of pages on my table. "What's this?" "Just something I'm working through," I said. She sat, glasses sliding halfway down her nose, and began to read, quietly at first. Then aloud, "By page 4. She was nodding. By page 10, she was tearing up. "Honey," she said, "this isn't therapy. This is a gift." It took some nudging, but I submitted a sample to our small independent press. Didn't expect anything. 2 weeks later, they called, then offered me a modest advance, then asked if I could expand the stories. So I did, while Emily chased curated influence. I was slowly building something rooted. The book was called The Quiet Backbone. It was about mothers who stayed until they couldn't, about women who went unseen, until they refused to disappear. I didn't write it for revenge. I wrote it so other women wouldn't feel as alone as I did at that folding chair. 6 months after moving, I got an email from Emily. The subject line read, "I saw your book." No punctuation, no emojis, just that. She said she bought it without realizing it was mine. Only recognized my stories halfway through, and that it made her cry. She didn't apologize, didn't grovel, but she ended with, "Maybe someday we can talk about it when you're ready." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I printed out her email, slipped it between page 117 and a chapter called "The Day I Realized Silence Was a Choice." I read it some mornings with my tea, not out of anger, but as a reminder. Sometimes they don't come back with flowers or apologies. Sometimes they come back with curiosity. And that's a start. In the meantime, life kept expanding. The book gathered attention, slow at first, then faster. Clubs invited me to speak. A podcast featured one of my chapters. And one night, I got a letter from a woman in Idaho who said, "I read your words while sitting alone in a driveway I paid for but was never welcome in." That one stayed taped to my mirror for weeks. Marlene and I started a little group at the community center. Not therapy, not quite. We called it inheritance. Each woman brought a memory, a lesson, or an artifact. We'd share, sip coffee, and reclaim pieces of ourselves. We weren't building rage. We were building recognition. That was my quiet counterplan. Not revenge, legacy. 1 month before the paperback launch, I got a call. Emily again? This time she didn't ask to be forgiven. She asked if she could come visit. Not for show. No live stream. Just her. I said yes. She arrived on a rainy Thursday. No umbrella. No design or anything. She hugged me at the door. "I don't have the right words," she said. "But I'm here." We spent the evening on the porch, listening to the rain, and talking about everything except what had happened. Sometimes, that's the only bridge you need. When she left the next day, she hugged me longer. Pressed something into my hand. It was a folded napkin. Inside, a hand-drawn crayon sketch of a woman in a triangle dress. Curly hair, stick arms holding a heart. My heart. Below it, "Mom is magic again." That night, I sat with the napkin in my lap and let myself feel all of it. Not the pain, but the return. Not every repair needs a dramatic speech. Sometimes it starts with a drawing on a napkin. And the decision to stop hiding in someone else's shadow. Later, I wrote one last chapter. It wasn't about her. It was about me. I titled it, "The Moment I Took My Name Back." I described the first time I signed something just for me. Not for a family plan. Not for a child. Not for stability. But because I finally believed my story was worth the ink. When the paperback came out, I slipped a copy into a padded envelope and wrote one line on a Post-it. "Your mother is more than a backdrop." I didn't sign it. She'd know. The truth is, I don't know what happens next. Maybe we build something new. Maybe we don't. But I do know this. My counterattack didn't come in anger. It came in ownership of my story, my space, my name. And that's the kind of legacy no one can rebrand. After the paperback launch, I thought the wave would pass. But something strange happened. People kept reaching out. Not just readers, but daughters, mothers, even grandsons. Emails poured in with subject lines like, "My mom needs to read this. Thank you for saying what we couldn't." I finally understand my grandmother. It wasn't viral. It was steady. Not fireworks. More like a fire pit. Warm, constant. A small local news outlet ran a story on the book. Then a syndicated columnist picked it up. Soon after, a mid-size publisher offered to re-release it with wider distribution. I declined. Instead, I asked for full control of audiobook rights and foreign translations. They were surprised. "You're turning down more money?" the rep asked. "No," I replied. "I'm turning down another person speaking for me." So I set up my own imprint. Hired a young woman who used to teach at the community center to help with admin. Paid her well. Gave her Tuesdays off to work on her own poetry. That was the power I had now, to choose what grows under my name. One day, a lawyer reached out on behalf of a nonprofit for elder women's housing. They'd read my chapter on silent homelessness, about women with roofs but no keys. They asked if I'd sit on their board. I said yes. That's how the Backbone Fund was born. A micro-grant program for women over 55 rebuilding after financial betrayal. And with it came the first big test. Andrew. He'd apparently been advised to respond legally, worried my depiction of him might impact his firm. He sent a letter, 3 pages. Dense legal language, buried in the middle. A quiet suggestion that I clarify certain fictionalized characters to avoid reputational harm. I stared at the page for a long time. Then I called Lenora. "You want to sue back?" she asked. "No," I said. "I want to educate." Instead of replying through lawyers, I wrote a public blog post. No names, no finger-pointing, just a piece titled, "When They Say It's Just Business, But It Was Your Life." It went viral in its own quiet way. Women copied paragraphs and pasted them into group chats. Book clubs read it aloud. A university ethics professor emailed to ask if she could include it in her syllabus. Andrew never followed up. The silence told me everything. Emily, meanwhile, began sending small updates. No pressure, no push, just seeds. This quote reminded me of you. Finished planting that lemon tree. It's thriving. Started journaling again. I didn't always respond, but I always read them. Then came the panel invitation. A national conference on legacy literature. Theme: women who rewrite their roles. I almost said no, then remembered the version of me, sitting at the folding chair in her daughter's housewarming. Too polite to speak. I said yes. When I walked on stage, there were 300 people in the room. Mostly women, all holding copies of a book I once wrote at my kitchen table. The moderator asked, "What do you say to those who think you were too harsh?" I smiled. I say there's a difference between burning bridges and refusing to cross ones built on silence. Applause came not like thunder, but like rainfall, steady, cleansing. After the panel, a woman approached me. She was maybe 70, hair pinned up, eyes sharp. "I'm not ready to write a book," she said, "but I did move my daughter out of my basement last week." I laughed, then hugged her. That's what the movement had become. Not stories. Signals. Beacons from woman to woman that said, "You can leave the chair. You can take the keys." The weeks that followed were full. Not noisy, not fast, but full. Workshops, conversations, emails that started with, "I thought I was alone." Even a retired judge wrote to say, "Your story reminded me of my sister. She died without a will. The family forgot she ever existed. Thank you for reminding me not to let it happen to me." Emily called again. This time, she didn't ask for anything. She just said, "I read that blog post, the one about business and life. It hit harder than I expected." I didn't say much, but she added, "I'm learning to listen longer, to talk less." That to me was progress. The final scene of my counterplay came quietly. I stood in front of a group of women at the community center. We were making vision boards. Glue sticks, magazines, laughter. One woman clipped a picture of a cabin by the water. Another, a pair of walking shoes. I pasted 3 words in the middle of mine. Keep the deed. Not literally, but as a principle. Ownership of self, of history, of silence that turns into speech. When I walked out that day, Marlene handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside was a sketch of a bridge. At the far end stood 2 figures, tiny but holding hands. She said, "You rebuilt it without blueprint or approval. That's more than survival. That's architecture." I went home, taped it to the back of my door, and whispered to no one in particular. We don't always fight back with fire. Sometimes we fight back by building something too solid to be erased again. That night I lit a candle. Not for ceremony, but for quiet. I opened a fresh notebook, wrote only 1 line on the first page. This time no one gets to edit me out. Then I closed the book. Outside, the wind rustled the lemon trees. Inside, nothing trembled, because I had become what I never thought I could be in their story. Unshakable. And the most powerful part? I never had to raise my voice to get there. It started with a podcast invite. The producer had read The Quiet Backbone, and asked if I'd come on their episode about financial invisibility. I said yes. The interview was gentle, thoughtful, even funny in parts. We laughed about lemon trees and learning not to text back right away. But near the end, the host asked, "Have you ever heard from the people who pushed you into this awakening?" A pause. Then, "Yes," I said. Some in whispers, some in silence, and some by trying to take the pen back. The episode aired on a Thursday. By Saturday, a clip had gone viral. Not because I said anything shocking, but because women started quoting it. They tried to write me out, so I published my own version. 1 week later, I received a letter. From a lawyer, again. This time, it wasn't from Andrew. It was from Emily. I sat down, heart calm, curious. Inside was a formal petition, requesting joint intellectual rights to the book, on the basis that significant lifestyle and personality inspiration had come from her. I read it twice, once with my eyes, once with my spine. It wasn't legal muscle. It was a soft, subtle form of reclaiming space, a rebrand of the erasure I'd once endured. She wanted co-credit, not co-ownership of memories, but of narrative. I called Lenora that afternoon. She whistled when she read the letter. "Well," she said, "that's a new twist. She's not coming for royalties," I said. "She's coming for the narrative." Lenora didn't laugh. She just asked, "You want to fight this the old way?" I thought about it, then shook my head. "No, I want to end it the new way, my way." We filed a quiet counterclaim, not to attack, but to protect the imprint, the fund, the voice I'd built. I included an affidavit, dated emails, original drafts, timestamps of the writing process. I also included her Instagram post from the day she called me aesthetic poison. And then I sent her something unexpected. Not a rebuttal, not a warning. A copy of the podcast, and a handwritten note inside the cover of The Quiet Backbone. "When you're ready to be the reader again, you'll find the truth doesn't need to be shared to be owned." No signature, just my imprint seal. Weeks passed. Her lawyer didn't respond. But she did. This time, it wasn't an email or legal form. It was a package. Inside, a return of the napkin drawing. A note beneath it. "You're right. I tried to step into the light without acknowledging whose switch I flipped. No co-claim, no argument, just that." I sat with that napkin in my lap for a long time, then folded it. Not to return, not to frame, just to remember that even reversals can hold grace. A week later, I went to speak at a university women's studies class. They had read my book alongside memoirs by Maya Angelou and Audre Lorde. I was stunned, humbled. One student asked, "How do you know when your story is yours again?" I said, "When you no longer ask permission to tell it." That quote was scribbled into dozens of notebooks that day. Later, walking through the campus gardens, I remembered something my grandmother used to say. People don't need to clap for your freedom. They just need to stop chaining it. That night, I hosted a small dinner for a few of the women from the inheritance group. Marlene made her signature lemon roast chicken. We lit candles. We passed plates. We didn't speak in hashtags. One of the women, Helen, stood up near the end. "I just want to say thank you," she said. "Not for the book, for showing us what reclamation looks like with its makeup off." I didn't cry, but I did squeeze her hand. Because in that moment, I understood the last piece of it all. Emily's attempt wasn't an attack. It was a reflex. A world that teaches women to compete for credit rarely teaches them how to share accountability. But now she knew, and I was done teaching through defense. Instead, I was going to live the next chapter aloud. Not louder, just unmistakably. In the following weeks, the podcast reached over 500,000 plays. Publishers circled back. A streaming platform inquired about adaptation rights. But this time I didn't rush. I made a list of conditions. 1. No dramatization that cheapens the silence. 2. No character based on Emily without my consent. 3. Marlene gets a seat at the writer's table. Some offers vanished. The right one stayed. I said yes, not because I needed a screen version, but because I knew someone, somewhere, would watch at 2 a.m. from their sofa bed and feel seen for the first time. That's the power of telling your truth. Without waiting for applause, Emily eventually reached out again. No lawyer, no claim, just a text. "Would you ever teach me how to tell a story the way you do?" I think I want to start again. I stared at it for a while, then replied, yes, but first, let's go silent together, so we can finally hear what the world has tried to hush in us. She sent back a heart emoji, then one word, ready. And for the first time since she was 10 years old, I believed her. Because when they try to steal your voice, you don't just speak louder. You build a room so soundproofed with truth that even silence echoes your name. It didn't start with a big reveal. No documentary, no front-page article. Just a quiet afternoon at the community center. Me and Emily sitting side by side at a long folding table, helping an 81-year-old woman upload her poetry to a shared Google Doc. You're patient, Emily whispered. I shrugged. She reminds me of someone. 2 hours later, the poems were up. The woman beamed. Emily cried in the car on the way home. Not for drama, but for recognition. That was how the new chapter began. Not with fireworks, but with a flicker. We didn't post selfies, didn't curate redemption. We just started showing up. To potlucks, writing nights, silent walks along the coast. One night, Marlene invited Emily to her kitchen. She made sour cherry pie. Taught her how to lattice the top. Emily laughed when she messed up the first try. Didn't record it, didn't filter it. I stood in the doorway and just watched. It had been years since I'd seen her like that. Not performing, just existing. Later that night, she asked me, "Do you think people can really change?" I told her the truth. I think people remember, and when they do, they become themselves again. The next morning, we planted herbs in the shared garden, mint rosemary and lavender. Emily had never gardened before, but she liked the way the soil felt under her nails. I used to think dirt was gross, she said. Now it feels like something I missed out on. That felt like progress. Every week, we added something new. A basil sprig, a bird bath. Neighbors stopped to compliment the smell. No one mentioned followers or filters, just scent, color, life. One afternoon, we hosted a workshop at the library, Letters You Never Sent. Emily suggested the title. She also read hers out loud. It was to me, and it didn't apologize for the past. It acknowledged it. I didn't know how to love you without needing to outshine you. She read, but now I just want to stand beside you. I didn't cry that day either, but I did reach across the table and hold her hand in front of 20 strangers. That moment wasn't a finale. It was a foundation. Later that week, Emily moved into a small rental cottage near mine. No influencers, no high-speed edits, just space to begin again. We started new traditions. Every Sunday, we'd cook one meal together. No phones allowed, just ingredients, old family recipes, and laughter that didn't need an audience. One night, Emily surprised me. She handed me a small book, hardbound, dusty blue, titled Relearning Motherhood. I started writing again. She said, I flipped through the pages. Each one held a small moment. Her childhood fears, teenage arrogance, adult regrets, but also wonder, curiosity, tenderness. You don't have to publish it, she said. I just needed to put it somewhere. That's when I knew. She had finally learned the difference between being seen and being real. In early spring, she joined the inheritance group, not as my daughter, but as another woman with stories. She listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, it was quiet but weighted. People respected that. So did I. And then one day, she said something I hadn't expected. I want to build something. Not a brand. Something real. With you. So we did. We co-founded a tiny retreat series for mothers and daughters. No slogans. No luxury packages. Just 3-day gatherings under old trees. With journals, home-cooked meals, and space to remember how to speak to each other again. We called it The Bridge We Built. The first session sold out in 2 weeks. Not because of hype, but because word had spread that something real was happening, and people were ready. At the closing circle of that first retreat, one teenage girl said, I thought my mom hated me, but she just didn't know how to show me. She didn't. That one sentence rewired the air. Mothers wept. Daughters held on tighter, and somewhere in the back row, Emily looked at me and mouthed, We did that. I nodded, because she was right. We had. That night, I sat alone by the shore. No notebook, no script, just the sound of waves that didn't need an audience. I thought about where we started, That house I bought, the folding chair, the silence I wore like a bruise. And then I thought about where we were. Not perfect, but not pretending. That to me was everything. Emily joined me a few minutes later. She didn't speak. She just handed me a cup of tea, then leaned her head on my shoulder. We watched the stars blink into view. Above us, constellations no one had to name. Between us, a peace that didn't beg for validation. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in decades, it didn't carry the weight of being forgotten. It carried the air of someone who had remembered herself. Fully. Because starting again doesn't mean erasing the past. It means planting something deeper, where no one thought life could grow again, and watching it bloom, with your name on the roots.